There's a number in your business right now that nobody's talking about, and it's the number of prospects who said yes to your offer, but then they disappeared into Never Never Land, right? And maybe they didn't really say yes out loud, but they did say it in every other way. They asked about the price, they watched the video, they said, let me think about it. They said, let me talk to my spouse, hit me up next week. And then they got nothing. It's just crickets, right? And you pretty much did everything right up to that point. You qualified them, right? You made the turn, you handled their objections, and you were just like one message away from collecting the money. And then they ghosted, right? And you let them ghost. And here's the math that nobody really wants to talk about when it comes to sales, right? 44% of your salespeople actually quit after one follow-up, and 60% of customers say no 4 times before they say yes, right? So if you're stopping at like touch 1 or touch 2, you're literally walking away from the majority of the money inside of your business, right? 80% of your sales are sitting in your follow-up, not in your pitch, not in your offer, not in your closing skills, right? 80% are dying because nobody came back. Maybe it's because the rep felt awkward, because the rep didn't have a system, because the rep got tired of sending, hey, just checking in, right? So today I'm going to show you how to follow up like a professional without sounding desperate, without sounding pushy, without sending one more, hey, are you still interested? Specifically, I'm going to show you the 7-touch sequence that I use across 30 days, right? The single message that brings dead lead back from the grave, the 2-bump rhythm, and the closeout move that flips the entire dynamic so that way they start chasing you, right? And if you do this right, you don't need more leads. You don't need a better offer. You don't even need to learn a new closing trick. You just actually need to pick up the money that you've already earned. Cool? All right, let's get into it. All right, so let's hop right into it. And so the title for the presentation today is How to Follow Up Without Being Annoying, right? And remember, like I mentioned in the intro, 80% of your sales are sitting inside of your follow-up, and most people are never collecting those, right? And so the amount of money you're making in your business right now might be pretty good, right? But just know that if we apply some of the stuff that we're going to cover in the presentation today, then you're going to be able to squeeze out a lot more sales from your business, right? So let's go ahead and hop in. And so I just want to talk about scenario real quick just to kind of cement this down for everyone, right? And so the thing that's happening here is imagine that you're at a restaurant, right? You keep trying to pay. So it's like you've got your credit card out, right? You're trying to wave down the waiter or whatever, right? And you're trying to pay for your food, and the server just keeps on disappearing, right? They just like never come back, or like they're hard to flag down, or they're just like gone or whatever, right? And that's what your follow-up feels like to your prospects, right? It feels like they're trying to wave their credit card and get your attention so that way they can pay, but then your follow-up is not consistent enough to push them over the edge, right? So that's pretty much the main premise of everything that we're going to cover today, right? So remember, 44% of reps quit after one follow-up, okay? 44%, that's a lot of your reps. That's like almost half, right? So I would check that and audit that inside of your systems right now, right? Especially in sales organizations when it comes to DMs and stuff like that, right? Especially when we're managing lots of DMs, your reps will tend to focus on fresh leads, right? They'll focus on people that are coming in, new people to talk to, right? But they'll not focus as much as on processing the leads that we already have. So that is a really important concept, right? Processing the leads that we already have. And that's what I'm alluding to here whenever I say 44% of reps quit after one follow-up, right? And remember, 60% of customers say no 4 times before they actually say yes, right? So no is actually the start of the sale. It's not the end of it, right? No usually doesn't mean no right now. It means no, I need more information. And so that's what I mean by 60% of the customers say no at least 4 times before yes. That's what we're alluding to at the same time, right? So we want to make sure that we're able to follow up with people and get through these, one, through the objections, but we've already covered that in a different video, right? In this case, is sticking to people and making sure that we're following up with them to continue answering their questions, right? Most ghosts aren't actually ghosts. They're reps who quit a little too early. So cool. Why people quit, or like, why do your reps not really do this well? A lot of times it's no system, right? Most times when we're approaching follow-up, it's not like you're given a process to do it. At least for me, whenever I was in sales organizations, right? It was kind of like, hey, you need to do follow-up. And that's not really, useful. And the second part is awkward messages, right? And so like they are sending these weird messages that don't feel good, right? And so they know that they're awkward. And so whenever they are sending out these messages that feel awkward to them, it makes them feel incongruent and like less likely to do it, right? So more importantly here, there's no system, which is where we're going to cover things here in this presentation. Okay, so let's talk about this in a dating example, right? This would be like the first date ghost. So you go on a date with someone, you had a great date, you have no reply, now what, right? So meaning like, you had a great date, you're trying to read, or you haven't really heard anything back from this person, right? So there was no text after or anything like that. So now what do we do? Okay. So most guys in those scenarios are going to like either spam them into blocking them, right? So they're going to say something like, hey, you there? You see my last text? Hey, they're just going to be very, very needy, right? Or they're going to go silent forever out of pride, right? Meaning that because there's too much pride for them to want to reach out because they feel like they may have watched some dating content recently that says that they shouldn't, right? Both people are going to lose in that scenario, right? And so there's a third move, which it requires a system and a real reason to come back, right? And the same thing in sales. Remember, in sales, right, when you say just check in, it's like the dating equivalent of you just saying like you up, right? Don't do that. We don't like it. Never ever send just checking in, right? It says nothing, it asks nothing, pure begging energy, banned forever, right? From here on forward. So if you ever see this message in your DMs or from your sales reps or anything like that, right? Just go ahead and take it out right now, right? It is different if I have a specific reason. So if I say just checking in, I know you spoke to your wife, right? How did it go? It's like if I lead you more with that, that's a little different, right? But we're never going to send just this message by itself. Okay. So what are some things that are banned forever? Let's talk about it. So banned forever, just checking in. Did you see my last message? Are you still interested? Just that, right? Are you still there? Bumping this up, right? All those are banned forever. All those are banned forever, right? We're going to use these instead. Any trouble with the link? Were you able to chat with your spouse? Did you get a chance to watch the video? Anything blocking you on your end? Got a sec to wrap this up, right? More importantly, what you'll notice with these is that some have low or little value in terms of a follow-up, right? It's just a message to send out. And these are a little more pointed and specific, right? So if we want to have better responses when it comes to follow-up, it's going to be these over here that are going to get better responses. Now, granted, would you get results in some of these? 100%. Have I said just bumping this up? 1,000,000%, right? So some of these things do work, right? Now, the thing that we're trying to do is make our follow-up efforts work more effectively, okay? So we're not saying that these don't work, we're saying that these work better, okay? So that being said, every follow-up needs a specific reason, because if you can't really name what you're following up about, there's not a good reason to send that message if you want a very specific reply. So for example, if I send a follow-up generically, like just checking in, I might get a response like, what's up, right? Well, that reply may have gotten me a reply, but that's not like a valuable response, right? So that's why we say every follow-up needs a specific reason, because I'm not just chatting with people to chat with them when it comes to sales, right? I want to chat with them to move that conversation forward into the next step. And so that's what we mean here, right? Cool. So specificity in dating, let's talk about this analogy, okay? So whenever you send someone, hey, what's up, right? That gets ignored, right? Hey, what's up is like a generic, like it's an open-ended question. It might work. It might work for like, someone that you have a really, really deep relationship with or whatever, right? But when it comes to someone that you're entertaining in dating sense and maybe you've met them recently, not the best, right? So, hey, what's up? Gets ignored. But if you said something like, hey, that place you mentioned, XYZ, whatever, it's open Sunday brunch, gets a yes, right? What I mean, and that's an incomplete statement right here on the second one. But really, what the point of what we're saying here, right, is if I want to go on a date with someone, and if I just say, hey, what's up? And then I'm not going to get a response, and it's going to be very unlikely for me to set that date, right? But if I said something like, hey, that place you mentioned is open on Sunday brunch, you want to go? That's very likely going to get more of a yes, because it's not only specific, but it also actually asks a question to get them to move forward, right? So same exact intent here, right? I want your attention is basically what it is, or I want some of your time, but completely different reception based on being specific, right? Because one has a specific hook, and sales applies the same way when it comes to follow-up, right? So just like here, we want to be specific. We also want to be specific whenever we're doing follow-up, because it actually gives them a reason to respond back to us. Okay. So what is our system? And remember, this system is for people who have seen our offer. Okay. So this is not for people who are, just maybe we have talked to them, maybe back and forth, a couple messages, right? This is not somebody that we have a relatively new conversation with, right? This is for someone that has been through our process, right? We take them through our sales process. Maybe they even been on a call with you, or maybe you've talked to them in DMs a good bit about what you have to offer, right? Those kinds of people. Now, in other videos, I talked about follow-up, but I talked about follow-up when it comes to people who are not engaged, right? In this case, I'm talking about engaged people. In other videos, I talked about non-engaged. For non-engaged people, we're going to follow up maybe 3 times. One, like that's pretty much it, right? This is much different because these are people who have seen your offer. So I just want to give that context ahead of time before we keep going. So the system, 7 touches, 30 days, right? Each one more specific. You can obviously bring in this calendar too, right? I always like to spread it out a good bit because I don't want to come off as super needy or desperate, but that's to each his own, right? The strategy is still the same either way. Okay. So there's kind of 2 phases, right? You have your hot phase, which is like the first week. We should follow up with people more consistently in the first week, right? Because obviously if it's fresh on their mind, they're just speaking to us. It's one of those scenarios where it's all top of mind, right? After 1 week goes by, right, and they're going cold, then we have to think about being more creative, right? We have to think about different angles. We have to think about how we can either reframe something or give value or like nudge lightly, which we'll go into in just a second, right? So the hot sequence, right? The first one in the first 24 hours, right? Specific question. Hey, any trouble with the link? We're able to watch the video, right? We want to reference the last action that they tried to do. Okay. In 72 hours, we're going to try to give a value add, right? Drop a case study, quick tip, zero ask, just give. And in this one, right, we want to make it proof based. So it'd be like, hey, hey, Bob just got through the program. On day 5, he was able to close his first XYZ. Here's what he had to say. Looking forward to seeing you inside, right? We could drop the case study like that, and that would be perfect. And then after a week plus, 1 week, right, the direct ask, right? So you want to wrap this up, or should I close out the file? So that's a good way to anchor someone, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay. Now the revive sequence, this is phase 2, right? So this is now like after we followed them a few times, right? And so now this is like we are entering into long-term follow-up. Okay. So after 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks plus, we're going to have the reframe. Hey, just had a client hit XYZ, thought of you, right? Super easy. So you can think of long-term follow-up as more information-based and notifying people of what's going on, almost like you're a reporter, right? So it's like, hey, you were interested in X, but just letting you know that, hey, this is going on in the community. It's super awesome. Very excited about it, right? Or anytime we add something new to the community, that's perfect too. Hey, we just launched an app, or hey, we just launched a new offer inside of there. A lot of people are getting results. Here's an example, right? So think of long-term follow-up as like that. So 2+ weeks, right? So that's the example right here. For 3+ weeks, again, useful content, zero ask, don't mention the offer, build trust, right? So more notifying, right? Hey, it's just having someone in our community use Claude to really do XYZ, right? Just thought I'd share that with you. The most important thing is long-term follow-up. We're keeping top of mind, but we're not being necessarily super, super pressuring. Right? And in this case, right, this is assuming that someone has ghosted us and they're not replying back. So 25+ days once we're out there, right? This is follow-up number 6. Hey, just want to make sure. I mean, I think this is a little needy, right? Where it says no pressure, just want to make sure I'm not bothering you. I would just say, hey, no pressure, just want to make sure this didn't get lost in your inbox, right? Lost in your inbox is different than say that I'm not bothering you. This is kind of a status thing to me, in my opinion, right? But anyway, that's what I got. And then 30+ days to close out, right? The follow-up message most powerful in your arsenal. So this is the one that's like basically we can get some pull on, some good conversation, right? And remember, in long-term follow-up, much different than here, right? Whenever we're in the hot sequence, this is more purchasing. And whenever we're in more of like long-term follow-up, this is more about just getting a response and keeping them engaged, right? Less pressure here, more just like building relationship and nurturing. So how to apply this or how to think about this in a dating context, right? Rhythm beats volume any days of the week, okay? So 7 texts in 1 day, that's going to get you blocked, right? 7 texts across 30 days maybe equals a relationship, right? I'm not saying it's going to equal you one, but for the slide purposes, equal relationship is good, right? So same number of messages, complete different outcome. The rhythm is what makes it feel respectful instead of desperate, right? And in sales, the follow-up is identical, right? So like, you do not want to follow up with someone 7 times in 1 day. That would make you seem like a psycho and make you seem like you are not someone that they should continue in a relationship with in any sort of fashion, right? But if you were to space that out and you follow up with them across time, right? Now, granted, this is assuming you might get ghosted or somebody, there's a lot of extra context here, but you get where I'm going, right? Cool. So what's the move? Once at the very end, right? Once we're at the very end and we are going to our last follow-up, right? They haven't responded to us, anything like that, right? What we want to go for is the pattern interrupt, right? So we'll stop begging, we're going to start closing the door, and then make ghosting expensive for them, okay? So what's the pattern interrupt in action, right? So you can see, hey, just checking in. And it's like, hey, want to wrap this up or should I close out the file? And they're like, oh, wait, don't close it out. Sorry, life got crazy. Can we pick this back up? Right. And so close out the file is a vague one, right? This one kind of works. It depends on your offer a good bit, right? But essentially here, the concept is called a takeaway, right? And so what we're doing is we're essentially saying, hey, look, like I'm taking away from you. I'm closing out your file, right? Or I'm moving on to someone else, or hey, like this is not available for anyone else. Or hey, we're limiting the spots, right? So I just want to make sure that you still want to take advantage of the grant we gave you, stuff like that, right? Like we want to do a takeaway. So in this case, right, a lot of people and in sales, when it comes to selling our offers, right, we are thinking about selling it to them. Most people would not do a takeaway, right? They wouldn't say, oh, well, you can't purchase now because I don't want you to, or like you can't purchase now because of X, Y, Z, right? Or hey, I'm moving on to another prospect because I don't want to waste more time here. Essentially, is what we're saying, right? But we're giving them the option to come back, and that's very key with follow up, right? So remember, people hate losing more than they like winning. I want to say that again. People hate losing more than they like winning. So what does that mean for us here? It means that when we do a takeaway, right, the pain of them not having access or not getting the result or not getting the thing that we offer is usually enough of a pattern interrupt to get them to pay attention to us, right? So pattern interrupt in dating, what does that look like? Stop chasing, watch them chase you, right? So she's been distant, and then most guys would double down in this case, right? They send more memes, they more, hey, what's up? And then they kind of start bugging her, right? And she pulls further. The pattern interrupt is the opposite, right? You go quiet or you name it and it's like totally cool if you're not feeling it, right? 9 times out of 10, she comes running back because loss aversion is undefeated, right? Sales is the same game. Loss aversion is undefeated. Sales is the same game. And in this case, for this, right, the more that you run towards them and you prompt more responses, the less likely it is that they're going to respond. And basically, the person who needs the sale the least is the person that's going to have the most leverage in the situation, right? So in this case, right, the more that you bug her and send more messages, the more she's likely to get the ick. And then the more you pull away, the more she's like, well, maybe I did like it and I don't want to lose that, right? So that's kind of the idea here in terms of that. So touch number 7, what's the closeout, right? So this is the final touch at the very, very end, right? The single most important follow-up message ever invented, right? It's like, hey, I'm closing out your file today. If you're still interested, just say the word. I'll keep it open. If not, no worries. I'll move on and stop bothering you, right? This is the takeaway, right? So this is the full, like, hey, I'm closing out your file. If you're interested, this is cool. If not, no worries. Boom, right? And this is a very easy one because now we're going to get a response. Either they're still interested 100%, or they're not interested and they're not going to respond, right? So you notice in this case where they say, wait, don't close it. Can we still talk? Right. And again, right, this is an example. This is not like a word for word message that you should try. And I mean, you could try it, right? But what I want you to understand is the concept, right? So more importantly, right, finality, permission, no pressure. So meaning whenever we close it off, right, and we say, hey, look, cool, well, I'm done with this conversation, I'm leaving, right? We're introducing that finality, right? And then suddenly they're the one chasing us because we're not applying pressure, we're walking away. Okay? So what does the dating scenario of this look like? What does that close out, right? So if you're in, I'm in. If not, no hard feelings, right? So the gray zone is what kills more relationships than fights do, right? The closeout collapses the gray zone into one message, and then either they clearly say that they're interested, or they clearly say that they're not interested. And in either case, you win, right? Sales is identical. Clarity is kindness and to them and to you. Okay, so let's talk about the 2 types of bumps, right? So these are like whenever I'm following up with someone, right? And so like how I'm deciding like what kind of follow-up should I hit them with, right? So there's a soft type of follow-up that gets them, like it's a soft nudge to get them to move forward, right? And then there's a hard nudge to get them to move forward. And we want to alternate them ideally, right? So the soft ones are generally speaking more low pressure, and then the hard ones are more like decision forcing. And a lot of this is like generally speaking the last line that you're going to send to someone before you're waiting on a response from them. Okay, so here's some soft bumps, right? So just dropped this case study, saw this, thought of you. quick update on what we talked about, low pressure, easy in, right? Very easy. Hard bumps is like, want to wrap this up? Are we doing this or not? Should I close out your file? Okay. So these bumps over here on this side, you'll notice like these are not necessarily prompting a reply, but these are prompting a reply. And we might get replies sometimes on the soft bumps because they might explain themselves or whatever. But on the harder ones, we're prompting the reply. So you have to kind of weigh the costs of doing each. I would highly suggest that you alternate them, right? So you don't always want to be like trying to like force a response out of someone because it can feel like they're being, but at the same time, right, we want to make sure that we move them forward as well. So soft bumps build a relationship, hard bumps collect the money, right? You need the both in rhythm. So let's talk about like how do we save our conversations, right? So meaning like in like what how like let's say we get ghosted and there's a couple scenarios here back to back, right? And we're going to talk about how to save in those scenarios. So save play number one, mid conversation ghost. So we're like having a conversation with them and they just like go off in a never land, they disappear, and we need to now reactivate that conversation, right? So totally cool if the timing isn't right. Just want to make sure I didn't say something off. That's a pretty good one. That whenever you're getting ghosted mid-conversation, right? A lot of times it could be that they were busy, they were confused, or a bunch of other things, or maybe the conversation isn't relevant to them. A lot of times it's that we said something confusing. So we want to make sure that we actually are acknowledging that, and that's a good way to go, right? Save play number two. So whenever they say, I need to think about it, right? And then they ghost, we go with like an assumption, right? So like, let's say in this case that they ghosted they said, hey, I need to talk to my spouse. And then we said, awesome. We had a little bit of a chat. And then now they've ghosted us, right? So we may hit them up the next day, right? Maybe it happens on a Tuesday and we talk to them on Wednesday and we follow up them to say, hey, I hope the conversation with your spouse went well. Either way, I wanted to see where you landed, right? We're assuming that they did the thing that they told us that they were going to do, which is in this case, if they said, hey, I'm going to talk to my wife about XYZ, and we follow our process and make sure that they give them all the information, stuff like that, right? Then tomorrow when we follow up, then we can assume that they have probably done so. Now, could they have not done it? Absolutely, right? But we can use that assumption to help move that conversation forward, okay? So the assumption move. Don't ask if they actually did it. Assume that they did, right? So in dating, I wouldn't say something like, did you check with your friends? That puts the burden back on her. I would say something like, hope the squad's down for brunch on Saturday or Sunday, excited to see you there, right? If I had invited someone to brunch. So that assumes that they talked to her friends because I probably already invited them and gives her an easy lane to basically say yes and move forward, right? So assumption is confidence, and confidence is what closes the deals, okay? Now, the boring part. Now, this is really boring, but it's an important part of every part of sales when it comes to this, right? And if you don't track it, you won't do it, okay? So when it comes to sales, especially follow-up, right? If you're not using a spreadsheet, a CRM, a Notion, something to keep track of your work, so that way you actually do it, right? Then you're not going to do it, generally speaking. So minimum tracking system for getting this done. You need the name of your prospect, you need the last touch of what was sent, and you need the next touch, right? And so this is something you could jot down on a journal next to you. I have plenty of team members that keep spreadsheets, right? I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to say whatever works for you and however your brain works is what I want you to do, right? To keep track of all of this stuff. Remember, boring systems beat clever tactics every single time, okay? So whenever it comes to setting up this, right, keep it stupid simple. Nothing complex. Nothing crazy, right? Keep it very, very simple, and that will make it easy and fun to do, and then easy and fun to track as well, okay? So remember, the 7-touch sequence is like this. First touch is in 24 hours. Second one is in 72 hours, and this is in reference to the first touch, right? The third one is about a week. Fourth is about 2 weeks. Fifth is about 3 weeks. Sixth is close to a month, and then seventh is basically unthou, right? So the full map: mindset, math, messages, sequence, system, okay? Run it for 30 days, watch what happens. Now, what's your homework? You're going to send 5 closeout messages today, right? So you're going to find 5 dead conversations from the last 30 days. You're going to send out a closeout message and see what happens. Now, you don't have to use my closeout message, the one that's written there. In fact, I suggest that you write your own. So that way you can figure out what works for your specific account, right? But more importantly, we're going to find these 5 dev conversations, and then we're going to send out the closeout message and see what happens, okay? Number two, we're going to build your tracking system. So you need to build in a Notion, a spreadsheet. If you got a notebook, totally fine, right? Get your columns out, everything. Just get something that you can track follow-up very nicely, okay? And then number three, you're going to block out the same time every single week, and that's when you do your follow-up window, right? And I, with my sales team and sales reps, we actually do this every single day. So we have a 30-minute or an hour window every single day where we're doing follow-up. I'm not suggesting that you have to do that to start, right? You can pick a block, right? 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours every XYZ time, right? But more importantly is that we spend time to do it every single week. And then that's a non-negotiable, right? We have to spend time doing that because that's how we get more deals out of the pipeline that we already created. Okay. Remember, the fortune is in the follow-up, right? It's also the part that nobody wants to do. And that's why you get paid for it. All right. Hey guys, remember, my name is Wally. You can subscribe down below because I'm going deeper every single week on DM stuff, frameworks, real conversations, stuff I really don't share anywhere else. I got some books linked down in my description, and you can pick up those there if you're interested in chat sales, DM automations, anything like that. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Peace.